8 days after parting ways with Tanner Engstrand, the New York Jets have hired their offensive coordinator for the 2026 season, and his name is Frank Reich. Right here on NY Flight Jets Talk, we discuss the hire, answer all your questions in the chat while discussing what's next. All of that and much more all coming up here on Wednesday edition of the pod. Let's go, baby.
This is NY Flight Jets Talk with Connor Long. NY Flight Jets Talk. We're talking Jets, 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 Jets. NY Flight Jets Talk with special guests. NY Flight Jets Talk. Here's your host, Connor Long. Jets, 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 Jets.
What is going on, New York Jet fans? Hello, everyone. Welcome back here into another edition of NY Flight Jets Talk. As always, I am your host, Connor Long, as we come to you guys live right here on this Wednesday evening, February 4th, 2025. Thank you all. 2026, excuse me. What are we traveling back in time here on the show? Thank you all for joining us. Be sure to drop down below, hit that like button, hit subscribe. That is the free way to support us and what we are doing right here on the channel, bringing you guys near daily New York Jets content, covering the team year-round. If you haven't already, go ahead, follow me on Twitter at Connor_Long15. And you can read my work, of course, over at jetsxfactor.com. Questions, comments, thoughts, throw all those in the chat. We're going to get to those. I want to engage with you guys. I want to hear what you guys have to say after the Jets have made their hire at offensive coordinator. And right as we clicked live, the Jets actually hired another positional coach that we'll dive into later on in the show. Carl Dunbar is the Jets' next defensive line coach. And again, we'll discuss that later on in the show. Obviously, the headline news made earlier today, Frank Reich, he's the Jets' next offensive coordinator. He was the first candidate linked to this job once the team ultimately parted ways with Engstrand just 8 days ago. You talk about the past 4 years for Reich. They haven't been very kind to him. 2022, he was fired in season as the Indianapolis Colts, head coach. He started the year off rough there. His offense that he was calling plays for was averaging under 15 points per game. Then he gets canned in Indianapolis. 2023, gets another head coaching job despite just being fired in season. It's with the Carolina Panthers, and it amounts to the same result. An in-season firing, a 1-10 start down south gets him fired. In season, the majority of his staff there was then fired after year one. He spent 2024 out of football after that horrendous run as the Panthers head coach. And then this past year went 4-8 as Stanford's head coach. When you talk about this hire, look, it's not very motivating. There's no way around that. In my power rankings, I had him ranked number 3 among 5 candidates. So kind of smack in the middle. Look, he is not the worst option. The Jets could have gone worse with Darrell Bevel, who was another finalist for the job. Lunda Wells was the candidate I had ranked dead last on that list. But again, there's really not much to get excited about. This is someone who has really, really struggled to produce in the modern day NFL, evidenced by his struggles over the past 4 seasons as a coach. His track record developing quarterbacks, I think people kind of cook up in their mind that, oh, Frank Reich is this quarterback whisperer. He really isn't. Again, Carolina 2023, Bryce Young had an historically bad rookie season under his watch. So certainly not the worst hire the Jets could have made, but not one that I think fans should be particularly excited about. Greg Roman was my favorite candidate for the job, and he was a finalist alongside Reich. So I do think the Jets kind of missed the mark there. Could have gone a little higher with Roman, but nevertheless, that I've discussed ad nauseum, these options are all downgrades compared to Tanner Engstrand. I would take Tanner Engstrand over any of the 5 candidates they initially interviewed. I would gladly take Tanner Engstrand over Frank Reich. And I guess what this tells me from Aaron Glenn, and based on his statement of the hire that we'll get onto later in the show, what this tells me about Aaron Glenn and the Jets is they are looking for a head coach on the offensive side of the ball. Glenn is taking on more responsibility this year than he did last year. His first year as a head coach in 2025, he tried the CEO thing. I'm going to be overseeing this operation, not calling offensive or defensive plays. Last year was obviously a disaster. His first season as an NFL head coach, they go 3-14. He fires his defensive coordinator and play caller 15 weeks into the season, and Steve Wilks. And now he is revising who he is as a head coach. He's taking on added responsibility. He's the Jets defensive play caller this year, and he obviously doesn't have an offensive background. So He needs someone in his mind with a ton of experience to be that head coach of the offense. And I think that's what he viewed Frank Reich as. They were teammates during the 1996 season. Reich, obviously a former quarterback from Long Island, a Freeport native. So overall, I think this is Aaron Glenn trying to find someone with the most experience possible to lead this offense and really be in charge of this unit moving forward. And again, I don't trust him near a rookie quarterback. I'm going to be honest. I really, really don't. History tells me that Frank Reich is unable to develop quarterbacks. And sure, he's a Super Bowl winning OC, yada, yada, yada. This is not someone who's had recent NFL success. His last success that you could really point to was 2021 with the Colts, and that was a middling offense. They were mediocre, right in the middle of the league. And sure, he won a Super Bowl as an OC, but keep in mind, he was a non-play calling OC. Now, sure, that isn't just someone who hands coffee to the play caller. They play a pivotal role in game planning leading up to the game, player development as well. However, let's not act like he was the architect behind the Philadelphia Eagles team with Carson Wentz and Nick Foles that ended up winning the Super Bowl and beating Tom Brady and the New England Patriots. He was a non-play calling OC. So I think that's a super important distinction to make right off the top. So it's going to be interesting to see where the Jets go from here. I think Reich is going to have a large say in which quarterback the Jets roll with for the 2026 season. If I had to make a prediction right now, I think it's Jacoby Brissett. I think Darren Mushi gets on the phone, calls up Monty Austin for the Arizona Cardinals and say, can we give you a fourth and a fifth round pick to get Jacoby Brissett? Brissett and Reich were together in Indianapolis for a handful of seasons, 2018 through 2020. Over that span, Brissett made 15 starts. He led the Cardinals to a 7-8 record, completed over 60% of his passes, threw 18 touchdowns against 6 interceptions. And you fast forward to the present, he's 33 years old, but coming off arguably his best statistical season. Kyler Murray went down in Arizona 5 weeks into the season with a foot injury. So Brissett started 12 games last year, and while they only went 1-11 over that span, it had little to do with Brissett. That offensive line, talking about the Cardinals line here on the show, was torn up into pieces. They had 9 different players starting games. Their week 1 offensive line combination only played in 3 games together for the entirety of the season. And when you look at the statistics, again, they were promising for Brissett. Nearly completed 65% of his passes, threw for over 3,300 yards. His 94.1 passer rating ranked 11th among 26 qualified quarterbacks. He set a career high in passing yards. So there's a lot to like with him in the bridge mold. That's important to keep in mind. No bridge quarterback is a long-term solution. And if Brissett were to come here, he's nothing more than just a bridge guy. But I think that makes more sense than the Jets trying to go to the well with a Marcus Mariota or Kirk Cousins or someone like that, or trying to trade for a Kyler Murray. I think that would make the most sense. Again, it has the connection to Reich, is coming off a really, really strong season. The Jets wouldn't need to give up much to get him on the trade market. And also, he's a cost-effective option. I think that's an overlooked facet of what the Jets need in their next quarterback bridge, in particular, someone who is cheap, because the Jets owe $35 million to Aaron Rodgers, excuse me. This offseason, they owe another $22 million to Justin Fields. So at the end of the day, the Jets need a quarterback who is capable of winning games, but also won't cost too much on their books. So the right connection, he's cheap, wouldn't have to give up too much for him on the trade market. He's serviceable. He can win you games. He can throw for solid amount of yards, and he's serviceable. That's the bottom line. That's what you look for in a bridge option. So I think, first couple of days of free agency, we're seeing a Schefter tweet that says Jacoby Brissett. First few days of the new leaguer, excuse me, we see a Schefter tweet that says, Jacoby Brissett to the Jets for a 4th and a 5th round pick, or 4th and a 7th, something like that. I think Brissett will be a New York Jet. That is my prediction. The draft is interesting. I haven't dove too deep into which quarterbacks would particularly fit his mold. I haven't gone that deep enough into any the later round guys either that potentially would fit what Reich's looking to do. But Drew Aller's the main guy that comes to mind. Super athletic, really, really guy, has a cannon of an arm. Look, Drew Aller, he makes sense with the Jets if they want to address their needs early in the draft. Use all 4 of their top 45 selections to really get a good roster. Don't reach on a quarterback, wait for that QB to come to you. get a stud defensive lineman, get a really, really, really good wide receiver, get a solid linebacker who can play next to Jamie and Sherwood, and really beef up this roster because overall, guys, this roster has holes everywhere. This is not a good roster under any circumstance. The Jets need help across the entirety of their depth chart. So your top 45 picks, if you're able to come away with, let's say, Arvell Reese, Denzel Boston, CJ Allen, Dylan Thieneman, and you take a flyer on Drew Aller in the 5th round, you sign Jacoby Brissett, like that's not the worst plan in the world. And then you have a really, really good roster next year in 2027 where you're picking with 3 first-round draft choices, 2 second-round picks, 5 picks most likely in the projected top 50. So I think this year's draft is more so, given that it's a really thin quarterback class, I think this draft is more so about building the roster, building a team around the future quarterback, taking a flyer on someone in one of the later rounds, and then really going all in next year on a guy with their top selection. That's the way I view it. And the Jets search for their next quarterback. Thank you all for joining us right here on NY Flight Jets Talk. Hit that like button, hit subscribe, completely free. Helps us grow immensely right here on the channel. Questions, comments, thoughts, throw all those in the chat. We're going to get to those shortly. Appreciate you all tuning in again. Questions, comments, thoughts in the chat. We are going to get to those. I want to hear what you guys have to say. I want to engage with you. As always, now I want to dive into the most recent hire that the Jets just made, literally, as I said, right when we went to click go live here on the show. Carl Dunbar has been hired to serve as the Jets' next defensive line coach. Maybe a familiar name for some fans because he was the Jets' D-line coach from 2012 through 2014. He's a long time assistant at the NFL level who is really established. He spent the last 7 years in Pittsburgh as the Steelers defensive line coach. Before that was with Alabama for 2 seasons as their D-line coach. Looking at it on the surface level, if you count his experience at the college level, he has had over 7 stints as an NFL as a defensive line coach in itself, 5 of which come at the NFL level. So there's no doubt that this guy's established. I like this hire on the surface. Again, you need someone with experience. The defensive line is super important for the Jets and NFL teams as a whole. But I say the Jets in particular because last year, under the watch of Eric Washington, who, yes, had a lot of experience, but had gone one and done in his last handful of stops and didn't particularly have a great reputation around the league. So many players across this defensive line regress. While you could point to the ascension of someone like Juwan Briggs, Will McDonald, Jermaine Johnson took a drastic step back under his watch. So Dunbar is someone who has been around an elite defensive line in Pittsburgh over the past couple seasons with TJ Watt, with Alex Highsmith, with that whole slew of guys, Cam Hayward on the inside. Overall, I really like this hire. Again, has been around a successful defensive line, and the Jets' defensive line is very thin. They needed someone to come in and help develop the players and get the most out of guys like Jamie and Sherwood and Will McDonald. So Carl Dunbar as the Jets' defensive coach, really like the hire. I want to hear what you guys have to say in the chat. So again, questions, comments, thoughts, throw those in the chat. We are going to get to those. I want to see what you guys have to say. Boom. Tank for Tice. I completely disagree with the notion of waiting till 2027 for a QB. There's no guarantee that the Jets could pick high enough to select one, nor no guarantee that any of the quarterbacks are good. I'll say this, Tank for Ty. I don't think any of the quarterbacks are good in this draft class to the extent where I would take them at number 2 overall, except Fernando Mendoza. Like I first, for full context, I would not trade up for Fernando Mendoza. I would not give a king's ransom to try to leapfrog Clint Kubiak and Las Vegas Raiders to go get Fernando Mendoza because I just don't think he's a franchise-changing player. But I just don't see anyone in this quarterback in this draft class who is worthy of the number 2, or you could argue even the number 16 overall pick as well. So why rush? The Jets have all this ammunition. They rush the quarterback selection and get it wrong. They are set back another 4 years. They have to allocate all of these assets properly, and I don't think it's a wasted pick to get a really good edge rusher. I don't think it's a wasted pick to take Carnell Tate. I don't think it is a wasted pick to start to really build your roster because at the end of the day, again, the Jets have holes everywhere. They need to add good football players on this team. So, look, I understand what you're trying to say that, there is no guarantee that there's going to be a better quarterback in next year's draft. Completely understand, completely agree. But why rush it now? Why? Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense for the Jets to force a QB pick this year's draft for the sake of doing it, especially when they're not a QB away. Especially when they're not a QB away. So while I understand what you're trying to say, I happen to disagree. Um, M123XYZ says take the trade up for Love and then trade up for Ty and LFG. So you're saying Carnell Tate, Jeremiah Love, and then trade back up for Ty Simpson. Look, I've been seeing some of the Jeremiah Love talks and the conversation regarding him, especially Jets, Bruce Hall, where does he go this offseason? Understood. I get it. I'm just really against taking a running back in the first round unless it's a clear cut consensus that they are generational. They are a once in a generation player, and this comes from someone myself who really wanted Ashton Genty last year. I was someone who was a big Ashton Genty fan, and I said if he's there at number 7 overall for the Jets on the board, he deserves legitimate consideration. But Ashton Genty is Ashton Genty. He's in a class of his own. He is a generational running back. I just don't think Jeremiah Love is that, and given the situation where the Jets are right now, it's completely different than last offseason when I was on board of them taking Genty. We didn't know what Bruce would look like in 2025. Bruce Hall was coming off a really, really rough season where he took a immense step back as a pass catcher. Fumble issues were there. The vision was a glaring issue. This year, he kind of steadied a lot of those doubts and put to rest a lot of the worries from this fan base and really showed who he is as a player. And he deserves an extension. He deserves to be franchise tagged. I franchise tag him this offseason. Give him another year. Buy yourself more time on a potential extension there. But I would certainly not consider Jeremiah Love there. But Carnell Tate, absolutely. I think Carnell Tate is an all-around receiver. You get the athleticism, you get the explosiveness. You also get the freakish contested catch ability. He converted over 80% of his contested catch opportunities at Ohio State last year, which is just crazy. There's no way around it. I think you could pair him with Garrett Wilson, and that is a really, really special 1-2 tandem of a wide receiver combo. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they do this offseason because, again, these next 2 years, between all the cap space the Jets have this offseason and the picks, same goes for next year. They get these right, we're talking about a completely different team on February 4th, 2027. But if they get these wrong, they're set back another 4 years. That's the issue. That's why these picks particularly are so crucial. I want to get in this comment take for Ty, since I simply just disagree on many people's evaluation on Ty Simpson. He's a future star, in my opinion. I like Ty Simpson. I do tank for Ty. He is my QB2 in this year's draft. I think he's a very, very quick processor. I don't think he had particularly the great supporting cast. A lot receivers had a lot of drops last year. The offensive line wasn't great per se, but I also think he needs to grow a lot. I mean, this is someone who has under 20 college starts. This is someone who needs to be put in a situation with a really, really strong development plan in place for him. And not only do I don't think the Jets are capable of compiling a strong development plan for someone like Ty Simpson, not only am I worried about Aaron Glenn trying to rush him into action too early after a rough start, trying to save his job, etc. But I just don't think he's a number 2 overall pick. I don't think he's a number 16 overall pick. I have him in the conversation of 20, 25-ish, end of the first round, maybe even early second. However, if the Jets really, really like him and he's sitting there at 16 and you get like a damn good player, whether that be on defense in RFL Reese or a Ruben Bain or a Carnell Tate on the offensive side of the ball, then I wouldn't be as opposed to taking Simpson. But he would need to sit as well. So it couldn't be at 2, and he would need to sit. Again, not fully opposed to it. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm not going to scold the Jets for taking Ty Simpson. If they do, it just can't be a number 2 overall. That's my rule of thumb for the Ty Simpson conversation, the Ty Simpson debate. I'll say that. Let's see. Where are we in the chat? M123XYZ says you're probably logically correct, but I only want to see some points. LOL. Interesting. You think Love isn't generational? If Jenny was there, would you take him this year? No, I'm gonna be honest. I wouldn't. If he was available in this year's draft, given the generation status, I would extend Brees Hall. The only reason I was in on Ashton Genty last year is because one, I was worried about Brees Hall. I had serious doubts about Brees, and I was wrong. I will admit that Brees proved me wrong this past season. But yeah, no, I would not take Jenny because one, I have more confidence in Brees than I did last year, and also the Jets have so many more needs this year than we thought they did in last year's draft. Running back is so far down that list. The Jets have a running back in Brees Hall who they could franchise tag, who they could look to extend right now. I think moving on from Brees would create an additional need. I think they need to keep Brees for another year. And I think taking a running back with all the needs that they have just wouldn't make sense. The Jets have so many holes to fill across their depth chart at every single position. Taking a running back and letting Brees Hall walk is just pretty much creating an additional need, which is the last thing that the Jets need at this juncture. Justin says, what do you think of the new D-line coach? So I'm assuming you tuned in late. For everyone just joining us, Jets hire defensive line coach Carl Dunbar. He's an interesting one. I really happen to like him, and I say he's interesting because he's had a ton of stints as a defensive line coach. 4 at the NFL level, 3 in the college ranks, just coming off a 7-year run as the Pittsburgh Steelers defensive line coach, where we've seen so many players have success. Alex Highsmith, TJ Watt, the list goes on and on. Cam Hayward on the interior of the line, who has been there forever. And the Jets defensive line is a mess after they hired Eric Washington to come in to be the D-line coach. Last offseason, Will McDonald regressed under his watch. Jermaine Johnson, Washington lost part of the locker room. The Jets need someone to really, really help out with this defensive line, and I think Dunbar brings just that. Again, has the experience, has a proven track record that you could point to. I'm a fan of this hire. A familiar face for the organization was the Jets defensive line coach under Rex Ryan from 2012 through 2014. So overall, I'm a fan of this hire, and I'm looking forward to seeing what is next as it pertains to other hires that the Jets could potentially make across their coaching staff. Thank you all for joining us right here on NY Flight Jets Talk. I'm Connor Long. Hit like, hit subscribe. Fun episode. Wanted to do just a 20-minute quick hitter. Get on here, talk to you guys for a little bit. Wanted to share my thoughts on Frank Reich. We'll be back some point before Saturday, so either tomorrow or Friday. I'll hit you guys with a pod. Hoping to have a guest on the show. By then, it's just tough to book a lot of the guests that we typically have because so many people are down at the Super Bowl now and tied up with Radio Row, etc., etc., etc. But nevertheless, thank you all for joining us. You guys the best. Appreciate it. That'll do it from me right here on a Wednesday edition of NY Flight Jets Talk. I'm Connor Long saying, have a great rest of your evening, everyone. And as always, JTS, baby. Jets, Jets, Jets. Peace out, folks.